Today, we welcome Steve Hurwitz, one of our earliest residents, who has a long history in marketing and advertising and now specializes in consulting with developers and builders, including Serenbe, on geothermal HVAC and infrastructure for homes and communities. In this episode, we talk with him about how Coca-Cola brought him to Atlanta from New York and his garage band, Neuroplasticity, which he formed with other residents, even though he didn't know how to play an instrument.
And he said, I want you to be in it. And I said, well, that's great. There's just one problem. I don't play anything. And he said, that is the idea. We're going to learn how to play. And we're going to build new pathways in our brains.
Well, I want to welcome everybody back to Serenbe Stories today. Today we have Steve Hurwitz, a very early resident. How are you, Steve?
Wonderful. Glad to be here.
Steve, so good to see you in person in the studio today.
Thank you.
I know. We're back in the studio. We're so excited.
It's great. Spent many good hours in this room.
That's right. That's right. It's actually our conference room, too.
Right.
So we quote the studio. So, Steve, one of the first things that we ask everybody when they come onto Serenbe Stories is, how did you discover Serenbe and find your way here?
It's a great question.
Okay.
And it's kind of an esoteric answer. Here I was up in Dunwoody, Georgia, which is probably the polar opposite space from where we are sitting today. It's north of the perimeter. And I had been working on something, and it was quite late, probably around midnight or so. And I just turned on the TV, and there was a Fulton County Commission meeting. I don't know if you've ever seen those or not, but it's like public access cable. And the meetings are broadcast.
Okay.
So people can, so they're public knowledge. And they were talking about sustainability in Fulton and how they needed to do so many things. And somebody just mentioned at the corner of the table about this new sustainable community, this experiment that was south of the airport in South Fulton. And they mentioned, somebody said, was that Serenbe? They kind of mentioned the name, and I was about ready to go to sleep, so I wrote it down. The next morning, which was Sunday, it was a beautiful day, and I said to my wife, I heard about this place south of the airport. We had never been south of the airport.
We hear that a lot.
You know, we're from New York, and we moved back and forth to Georgia and Virginia, but we had never really had any reason to come south of the airport. And we lived in a lovely gated community, executive community, 34 homes, manicured to the hilt like English gardens. Mm-hmm. So I said, let's take a ride. We're kind of ready to see something new. Let's take a ride down to Fulton County. We rode down, and as we started to come into Chattahoochee Hills, so that's the discovery. As we started to come into Chattahoochee Hills, a feeling of calm came over me and a feeling of great familiarity. Because even though I'm from New York and I worked in New York City and I was all part of that 80s conspicuous consumption, I'm a country boy. I was brought up 50 miles from New York in a little working town called Peekskill, and we had farms and ranches and things like that. And I started to feel like I was home even before we got here. And then we came down, and Steve, I can't remember where the sales office was in 2005. Was it in somebody's house? It was in a townhouse, I think. Could have been Pepper's townhouse.
Well, for a while, it was in the White House up on the hill there.
Maybe that's where it was. I cannot even remember.
It could have been, we kind of popped whatever house was available. We popped the sales office around.
Right. And there was a table there, with a glass top, and phase one, basically, with some blanks for 2, 3, and I don't even think 4 was there yet. And we went around a little bit, walked into the office. We met Raina, and we met Garney. And Garney must have been in her early 20s. This is going back to 2005, 6.
Yeah, she would have been like.
And we started talking, and we talked for about 45 minutes, and she kind of outlined what everything was, what was going on. And as we drove out, I said to my wife, I think I'm home.
Wow.
And her comment was, Frontier Town? She was like, what are you talking? She was worried already because she knew I was excited. And we came back several times. And then we took some time off. So about a year went by, as happens with Serenbe prospects and buyers. It takes time sometimes, especially in the early days.
Because then there were, 20 houses maybe?
Maybe there were 20 houses here.
And it was just a dirt road out.
Where we were sitting right now, there was nothing.
Didn't exist, yeah.
Not any of the buildings were here. Not even the townhouse.
Was the Daisy there?
The Daisy was there, and there were houses going up the street. Steve's townhouses were there, but could there have been 25 families here? Maybe
max.
We'll have to find some photos of that, you guys.
Steve has some. So we came down several times quietly, and one night we came down. It was a Sunday night in February, and I think that we bought in March. And we drove in, and it was kind of dark. It was twilight, dusk, and it was cold. And we drove up Selborne, just about to the Daisy. There's a guy walking down the street with a clipboard in his hand. You know why? There were no iPads. There was no iPad, or not one in your hand. No iPhones. No. So there's a guy walking down the street with a clipboard, and it was Steve. And I pushed down the window, and I said, "You're Steve Nygren?" He goes, "Yeah, I am." I said, "Any guy who's working on a Sunday night at 6 o'clock in February, I want to live here." And that was it.
Yeah.
That was the end right there. So this guy has a commitment. I'm willing to make the commitment. I think it's going to have great opportunity for us. So that's how we got here, and that's how it got cemented. And then through a long process with Garney and Raina and the gang, and we had a nice signing at a restaurant, and we bought the townhouse right next door to the development office before the development office.
Right, and which is basically right next door to the Hill restaurant. For
That's
people.
the Hill.
Yeah.
We're above it, and we bought and Steve has shown me pictures where our building was the only building there.
Yeah.
Nothing across the street, pads,
Right.
but nothing, and our townhouse was still under completion when we bought it.
Okay.
So that's the basic story.
You were at the very beginning of that second piece of phase one.
Yeah. It's very exciting times.
Tell me what it was like in those, I would call it the early days.
I have to tell you, you need to, I think, to really appreciate Serenbe the way we do, and I include Honey in that now, since she's now in the ukuleles, which is
this is
ukulele
Steve's
group.
wife he's talking about.
Yeah, my wife, Honey. In a way, I think she's enjoyed it more than me, because she's had so many enriching relationships and experiences. But it was Sunday nights at the Daisy with just about everybody in the street because there was little traffic. We bought pizzas. The Daisy served pizzas then on Sundays, and nobody knew whose pizza was whose. And we just all sat around and chatted, and it was sort of like college, It was like freshmen in college. And there were younger people and older people and people from all over the country. And that was kind of the core of how things got started, the tight-knit group of it. And then it became an ever-expanding community. But I remember people driving in those days. And I think you were doing weddings, Steve, already, but it was still pretty well unknown. And people driving in and saying to me, "What is this place?" Now that does not happen.
Right.
Because people are aware, thanks to you, Monica, and your crew, and Steve, that doesn't happen anymore. Because people do know why they're here, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But in those
It
days,
still happens now and then. I
Does
mean,
it
people
really?
that come for conferences or weddings, it does.
and they say, "What is this?
They do.
What is it?"
And I spoke with someone just this morning, the woman from SCAD.
Yeah.
And she says, "I pull up your webpage and I can't believe I did not know anything about this." I'll have to admit.
Right.
And we talked, she said, I think I know Atlanta. And I said, "But you don't know Southwest?" And she said, "No, I had to pull up a map to see where this was."
Right.
So I think that still exists.
It does, and I think that's part of the charm of it. Really, is that it's not insular, but it's not even isolated, but it's a hidden thing. It's a hidden gem. Until you come on it, then it's your reality.
Right.
But you could drive past the entrance if it weren't for the little Serenbe signs. forever.
Yeah.
And not know what's in. And I think that's part of the excitement versus a major to-do entrance, which many subdivisions have, and it's very important to them to have the brick wall with the name and
the water fountain,
the water fountains and the waterfalls and the bridges. Serenbe is a discovery place.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a great compliment from a marketing guy who's used to encouraging those kind of branding things.
You know what, Steve? If I was planning it, I would have said, well, we need an entrance.
Right.
And you'd have said, no, we won't. And I would have said, I quit. Right. So, this guy, I'm never going to get along. He doesn't understand anything. Where's the big ad campaign? But that's the beauty of it, is that you come on it, and as you drive in, it's like, and as Steve knows, in my current career, I work with many developers from all over the country, all over the world. And part of the magic is driving in and watching their faces as I describe the experience from the entrance to the daisy.
Yeah.
It's like when you hit Crossroads, they get it. We haven't seen Grange or Motto yet. And the minute they see Crossroads, they're like, I'm in a town. I'm in a town. When we talk about intentional communities, and I know all the words because that's what I do now, and I've been fortunate enough to work with Steve for 15 years, a lot of people don't get it.
Yeah.
They want it, they see it, they don't know how it happens. Right. It's a magical thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think the discovery of individuals who come, that's kind of the cool thing, that you feel like you found a little secret.
It feels like that almost all the time. And then as we've said over the years, when we've had some cultural events and my brother's band came down and was playing across the street at our wine and chocolate shop that Jane Whitehurst had, I said to Steve, that was a Saturday night, just another quiet night in the country.
Yeah.
And it was rocking. Just rocking.
And now this happens regularly. I mean, about 3 Saturdays ago, there were 3 different big events going on.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just still kind of a little bit of a gem.
Well, in the segue, you mentioned marketing. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got from New York to Atlanta and your time in Dunwoody.
Yeah, that was no accident. I worked for most of my career in advertising, and I worked in New York City for a major multinational ad agency called McCann Erickson, which was actually part of a conglomerate called the Interpublic Group, which was at that time the world's largest communications company. And I worked my way up there from an account supervisor to management director, senior vice president, management director. And I had some wonderful accounts, Sony Corporation, Johnson & Johnson, worked on some General Motors stuff, some Pillsbury things, had a nice portfolio, living the life in New York.
Sure.
All the things you missed the Mad Men era by about 5 years. I was a little bit older, a little bit younger than that.
3 martini lunches.
There was only one when I got there. But there were some of the old timers that were still doing the 3 martinis.
Sure.
But anyway, Coca-Cola was one of the largest accounts at McCann. It was an international account, probably in 75 countries, everywhere. Exxon was one and L'Oreal was another. They were huge accounts. Well, there was a challenge on the Coca-Cola business, unbeknownst to me, on everything that was not in a bottle or a can. So it was the fountain business, which means zoos, stadiums, amusement parks, Disney, fast food restaurants, C-stores, convenience stores. And they felt like they weren't getting the attention that the bottle can side was getting. And that's the glamorous side. Have a Coke and a smile, Mean Joe Green, all that wonderful stuff. Fountain was just quietly making all the money and getting no agency attention. So they tapped me to come down and run that Fountain account, which is now called food service. So I came down within 2 weeks. I asked my boss, when am I leaving? He said, get a ticket. And that was it. We were gone in 2 weeks, packed up our car. My family had never been south of the Jersey Shore.
How old were the kids?
My son was 13.
Yeah.
Not a great time to move.
Yeah. And so you knew you were moving. It wasn't just coming down for...
It was supposed to be a project.
A project.
That's the way they get you to move. They go, it's only two years.
So you didn't give up your house yet?
No, not for the first year. We rented, and then we realized we're here. So we stayed, and I actually ended up working for a friend of Steve's, Clisby Clark, who's passed on, but working for McCann Atlanta, working with Dave Fitzgerald at Fitzgerald and Company, which actually got acquired by Interpublic, and Steve knew Dave quite well.
Interesting.
And so everything has a story to it. But that's how we got here. First, we lived in East Cobb because that's where the school system was for our son. We moved to Virginia for a couple of years after he went to school. Then I was transferred back here, and we lived in Dunwoody. And I left my job in 2005.
Okay, so right around the time that you were
decided to go
Serenbe.
out on my own.
Yep.
And one of the things that Serenbe was part of was the change in my life from coming from that 4,000 square foot executive, 3 bedrooms up.
All the things you thought you needed.
All the things, except for the sustainable and quality part of life.
Yeah.
And the people there they weren't my peeps.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. You know what I mean, Steve? They weren't my peeps.
And you realized you didn't know it. You waved at your neighbors, but you didn't know your neighbor.
Yeah.
They all had the garages I did. I mean, I lived here at Serenbe. I actually still do. I lived here at Serenbe without a garage. I didn't think it was possible to live
Isn't that funny?
without a garage.
Right, but isn't that a crazy world
And
that we live
it's
in?
one of the things that was, people park on the street, and I'm like, what do you...
You're like, how? What?
And then Garney said to me that day, well, because we have to have green space, so they can't have garages. And when you first look at that, you don't see the value in it. You don't understand. You're like, hey, but I need mine, And somebody says, well, there's no garages in the front, those who were fortunate enough to have garages. And you're like, why not? That would be more convenient. So you can't go around the back and upset the green space. Just put it to the side of the house.
Yeah.
Well, and the fun thing, because, on the outside of the mega, all those houses can have a garage.
Yes.
And in the initial phase, the builder said, we have to include a garage. And we encouraged them not to do that. And very few people have built a garage even when they had the opportunity to. They don't want to block their view of the woods.
It's fabulous. You walk out your backyard and you're in the woods. And until you understand, I mean, really, the commercial part for me, the Serenbe commercial is the land plan is so unique and so magical. With these omegas. And until you show somebody and walk one and see how you can walk through the woods to get to somebody's house faster than if you drive and how much more delightful it is,
right.
People just don't understand the land plan.
Mm-mm.
Well, in the next decade, the challenge is let's get people to let go of their cars.
Well, I tell the story that somebody once said to Steve, and I think we were in the meeting, he said, how are you going to regulate golf carts? And Steve turns around, he says, regulate golf carts? I want to regulate cars. I never forgot that. And so
everybody probably pin drop. Everybody's like, what?
Huh? Who cares about cars? Get them out of here. That's the regulation. No regulation for golf carts. But once you get the hang of it and you see what the green space really looks like, and the way it's laid out with the buffers that are in between in a regular subdivision, those would be houses or manicured lawns. Right. They're woods.
Well, we see a national trend that people are disengaging from their cars. And I think Serenbe is that place. And Monica, that's one of the things we can talk about is a real campaign because people walk here and use their golf carts, generally their cars are parked.
Yeah.
And what is that costing them to park that big piece of machinery?
I'm one of them.
Versus if you have a zip car and lift, you actually can save money.
Tremendous amounts of money.
And the worry about that car aging and repairs.
My car sits.
Yeah.
I mean, we use one car. We have 2 cars because you know why? That's the way I grew up.
Right.
If you're making money and you're in the suburbs, you have 2 cars.
Sure.
And they better be new, or else.
And a 5,000 square foot house.
Absolutely.
And a gated.
That is very inefficient. And a gate. That people and still there was a robbery and people wanted to have guards at the gate.
Oh, wow.
So, that's just the way it goes. But, and then people do ask me about that. We have no gates here.
Right.
Instead, we have eyes on the street, which is the most secure thing you can have.
We were just talking about that, those 2 little girls yesterday that got lost.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that Facebook
I did.
post. Ann Beedler posted a Facebook that 2 little girls last night around dusk were lost. They probably visiting for camp or something.
Oh, interesting.
They came to her porch. Her light was on.
Oh, see?
They came to her porch and say, hey, we don't know exactly where we are. And they found their father, and
Yeah. Well, and the same thing happened to me 2 days ago. I was coming down Atlanta Newton Road, and there were 3 kids and a dog on the side of the road waving at me in the rain. And I pulled over, and I was like, what's going on, guys? Do you guys need help? And they were lost. They had been on the trails, and they popped off on Atlanta Newton because our trails pop right out. But they, as kids, they're 10 and 11, they didn't know. They're not familiar with driving it. So I knew they were just, a second from Serenbe. I just was like, get in the car, threw them in the car. And then they got in the car. I'm like, oh, I know both your parents. I'm like, whose house do you want to go to?
That's fabulous.
And I just dropped them off.
That's the way it is.
And it was like perfect little.
And you know what?
They're always
if somebody's cat is lost, instantly there's 30 Facebook posts. That happened yesterday.
Yep.
Well, the important thing with kids is this is giving them independence. And that level of confidence that they were out and then had a little excursion.
Like we used to do. We used to get lost in the woods when we were kids, in streams. That's part of the being home.
Exactly.
And somebody asked me this morning, what is Serenbe about for these families? I said, Serenbe is about a kid in their pajamas, riding up to the Daisy on their bike.
Yes.
Going to get a donut or a muffin.
And putting it on the house account.
Yeah. Putting it on the house account.
Yeah.
So it's not, like I say, it's a highly sophisticated place that has a wonderful set of low sophistication opportunities. So they get a muffin and they put it on their parents' house account.
Yes, exactly.
That's funny, Steve.
So since you've moved here, you were saying, so in 2005, you sort of set out on your own. You've had quite a fun experience with just Bosch coming here, geothermal. We can talk about solar, but tell us a little bit about that arc and how you came into this world. And I'll just state that, Steve has sort of an eye for people who roll in, who have talent. And he's like, oh, I'm going to put you to work somewhere.
Steve is, I don't think I'll insult him too much. Steve is very good at that.
Yes.
He very good at reading people, thank goodness. And he knows what you want. And I do love to volunteer. And I helped with the businesses for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, you ran the SBA, the Serenbe Business Association.
Here, and it was challenging. We had some good times. It was fun. And then Bosch came to build the Experience Center, just making a long story short. And Steve was actually kind enough because, I ran the Business Association. All of the Bosch units were coming. They were in this room. So all the advertising people, the product people, from appliances, from geothermal, from spark plugs in automotive, everything. And Steve said, as the head of the Business Association, if you would like to come to the meeting and make a little discussion about it, and you're on your own. See what happens. Because I'm a consultant. That's what I do. And I did hit it off with one of the guys that was working on the geothermal piece for Serenbe in the Southeast. And the Bosch Center came about. He left. A new person took over the Bosch Thermal Technology Division, which makes geothermal heat pumps. And he hired me to work with, lo and behold, developers. So, and Steve at that time it came out of his mouth. He said, motto is going to be mandated. That's phase 3, mandated geothermal.
That's incredible. That would have been like 13. You were thinking that?
It was like
2013.
That's not going to be easy because there's some complications with geothermal. It's not easy, but as Steve says, it's the right thing to do. And truthfully, it is.
Well, because we knew the third phase motto was going to be very dense. And as you know, one of the key things is not only the energy savings, but it's silent. And so if you're in a dense area, you don't want a bunch of air compressors. You want to hear the birds.
I don't want that next to my house. Can I retrofit geothermal? My husband asked me the other day.
Oh. Of course you can.
But it's expensive.
I think you should wait until your
Just do a new house.
Just move a new house. Do a new house.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move into a new house.
You're going to move into I know you've sold your house.
Yes, we sold our house and moved into what I now call. We sold our house in November. And after 15 years, right next door. And believe me, I miss it.
Yeah.
I really do, because I was right on. We were on this. We had the townhouse.
You were in the middle of it all.
I was in the middle of
We
everything.
miss you on the balcony,
Yeah, man,
waving.
I spent a lot of time on that balcony.
I feel like maybe you can rent it back from.
Actually, the guy was a very nice guy. He has a
great.
nice family.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, because his mom is using the apartment that was downstairs, and that's what it's there for.
Yeah.
And it has an elevator, so she's private. It's a good situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, not knowing what the heck to do and wanting to take a break, we moved into the textile lofts, which is the apartment building here, which is what, Steve, about 6 or 7 years old, I guess. And it's geothermal.
It's not quite 4.
Is that all? My goodness.
5, maybe? Time goes quickly.
Time goes fast.
Yeah, I don't know.
By the way, it's geothermal. I helped put the geothermal. My house was not geothermal. I used to get mad at Steve after I used to get my heating and air conditioning bills. Why didn't you mandate it earlier?
Well, and that's an interesting point, is that even though motto is fully mandated, or I should say required, because mandate seems like such
It's
a
a bad
negative.
word,
It's
yes.
required, as it should be everywhere. But a lot of pocket neighborhoods also
Yes.
have it, like Swan Ridge and Textile
Swan
Loft.
Ridge
The Blue
has
Eyed
it.
Daisy.
Blue Eyed Daisy,
From
which was the
2004,
original.
right in
Yep.
the beginning.
As a matter of fact, the Blue Eyed Daisy is probably, I don't know if it still is, but now that I know about these things, I think was the smallest LEED certified building in America.
I believe it still remains the smallest silver LEED certified.
Yeah.
I understand there's an information center somewhere that has gold.
Really?
And it's about that same size. You normally would not spend the money.
Because whether it's 10 square feet or 10,000, it's the same price to get LEED certified.
Right, right.
So Steve, again, why? It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And the geothermal was the right thing to do from the neighborhood and the connectivity of the neighborhood and the ability to talk to each other and go out, but also from a sustainability point of view. There's no fossil fuel burnt. The climate conditioning is better in the house. It's very quiet even in the house. And I'm really enjoying it in the lofts. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And we actually, through Steve, we put the geothermal infrastructure field across the street in one of the pastures
Of the horse-
outside the barn.
Yeah, by the stables.
There's 54 holes there covered by horse grazing.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And everyone said, I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know what to do.
Tried to get a hold of the pond, but Steve had other ideas for the pond because you can use water. In
Yeah.
fact,
Well, and it's
one
u-
motto
I was
uses
gonna say.
the pond.
Well, you see, and the nest is
the nest
already
is
in the
too.
pond.
And that's 14 houses, I guess. So very, and it's just gone from there. And the opportunities for me have been great, but it's really advertisement for Steve. It's really because he gave me the opportunity, as he does for a lot of people.
Yeah.
What you do, and that's true of Serenbe, what you do with it when you get here is up to you. You want to open a cheese shop? That's an 80s thing to say, but go ahead and do it. And don't say you can't, you won't, it's not. Try it. Whatever
Right.
you want to do. Now, we started this band. Steve, give me a commercial on the
Tell
band.
us about the band.
Come on, Steve, give me a commercial.
Do you want to come on? You tell us about the band, Steve Nygren.
Well, Steve I told Steve the other day, makes me very nervous when he shows up. But a bunch of old guys, I got a call from my neighbor. He said, hey, I'm putting together a garage band, which is a kind of a 60s term for kids that used to practice the Beatles in their garages.
Sure.
And he said, I want you to be in it. And I said, well, that's great. There's just one problem. I don't play anything. And he said, that is the idea. We're going to learn how to play. And we're going to build new pathways in our brains. His wife's a psychologist.
And everyone's how old that's in that band.
Everyone is over 65, mostly over 70. And I'll be darned. We did find one guy who helped us, who's sort of our conductor, but we put on performances.
Yeah,
And they're
amazing.
And we
incredible.
packed people in.
Oh, incredible performances.
80 people showed up to the last potluck pre-pandemic.
Yeah, well, and tell us what the name of the band
The name
is.
of the band has to do with the psychology behind it, which is neuroplasticity, which, if you look it up, has to do with the psychology of building new pathways and reinvigorating your brain, which, again, you want to learn? Now we have a paint space here.
Yep.
We have the ukuleles, which is a bunch of women
which were in the 4th of July parade, and I believe
they won as best float, and they all learned how to play the ukulele. They have T-shirts and everything.
I mean, amazing.
So what do you want to do?
Right.
You come to Serenbe, you want to do it, you do it.
I think you did line dancing, didn't you guys?
We did do line dancing.
And
We
you
were
were in the parade
for
one
line
year.
dancing.
Yep.
Now, a couple of Jewish people from New York, that's pretty scary.
That's good.
We did. We went to Sharpsburg every week.
Yeah.
Had fun. So...
Well, and you've ended up traveling with a lot of your friends. And
I tell you, we've made some trips with Serenbe that have been fantastic. And I must tell you that the cultural experiences that we've had, both planned and unplanned, meeting people. Mm-hmm. We've met everyone from a retired colonel in the military to our neighbor who is the ex-conductor of the Seattle Symphony. And they're in a room together and they're talking. Where do you have that opportunity? Mm-hmm. You know, the beauty is we go outside, there's bikes on the street. Mm-hmm. There's little kids out there. Many of our friends are younger than my son. And we don't even think about it.
And your son's in his 30s now?
He's in his 40s. He's 45.
Okay. Oh,
we
wow.
have friends I know. It's hard to believe. We have friends that are in their 30s that we go out with. They're equal.
Yeah.
Where do you have that opportunity?
I don't know.
Very rare.
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of Serenbe. I'm unashamed about it.
Yeah.
Unabashedly. Now my problem is Steve took me to the Ridge.
Oh, I was going to ask you about this.
On his gator.
Which is scary.
Which is very scary. And that's the new thing that's coming up, which is Lupo Loop. And I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Let's just sort of give everybody a little bit of a teaser, right? We're going to release
Steve could do that.
A good number of homes up there, 50 or 60 in the fall. And I believe everything has to be geothermal. Everything has to be earthcraft, but drum roll.
We, as Steve knows, and Steve's helping me do this, we are looking at what it means to make everything mandatory solar. Mm-hmm.
Which means it could be off the grid.
Which is incredible.
Which would be amazing for people. I don't think people even fathom what that could mean to them, that there's no brownouts. There's no, it's very exciting. Mm-hmm. And there are many people saying, can't be done.
Right.
Which to us really is the battle cry to say, let's go get it done.
Heck yeah, I think that is the
it's
challenge.
Like, you can't do that.
Oh.
That's not the way it's done. I've heard that so many times here.
Well, 50% of Serenbe is what couldn't be done 20 years ago.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's true. And again, developers come in and they go, how did he do that? Mm-hmm. How did that happen? I said, It didn't happen. It just takes attention.
Mm-hmm. Focus and
no
vision.
chipping away at the edges. Mm-hmm. Very difficult to do in today's day and age. A lot of experts out there.
Well, and I think the biggest thing that we know as a planet at this point, that the built environment is a huge issue that we have to deal with. The grid is another huge issue, and transportation's the third. And if we can decarbonize all of those, that's how we're going to get to 2030, wherever our numbers are today, 45%, and then to 2050. So I think that solar is an amazing data point to add on to the sustainable already, to say, how do we reduce demand?
That's right.
And we see, now post-pandemic, a lot of people said we predicted it. It was just a matter about when. Well, there are a lot more people talking about the grid going down. Whether it's, and we've seen examples of it, whether it's a natural disaster or terrorism.
Yeah.
And just imagine being dark for a month, that the grid's down, your cell phones are down. Mm-hmm. We think this was a difficult year.
Well, we saw what happened in Texas.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that took a week. Mm-hmm. People were it was pandemonium.
Mm-hmm. And it's all so tied together and so fragile that it could really be a major problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting.
It is exciting.
I want to be in one of those houses.
Exciting to be part of the solution.
Yeah. Yes. Part of the solution, living in the solution, continuing on in Serenbe, where in 15 years we've seen 3 different generations come in.
Yeah.
Mine being one, but there's Xers, now there's millennials, and all living together.
Yeah, I think Zoomers are next.
Zoomers are coming in. Yeah.
I think so. Right?
And you're helping to lead this change. That's the fun thing, is people come and find their own place, their own sheet of music, so to speak.
Yeah. It's been a great journey. And we're only in the middle. So,
we're only in the middle.
You know, it's a great journey. We're very lucky.
Well, one of the last questions we always ask is, what is it that you would tell somebody that would come to Serenbe who's never been? What sort of an undiscovered, interesting thing that they should do? And maybe it's just go get the truffle fries at the farmhouse.
Well, that's a good start. Also, the fried oysters at the Hill are really good, unfortunately. Monica, that is a great question. And I don't... The reason why I'm having a little trouble with it is because I think people find their own way here. They find what is right for them. I think now, even more than before, and I look at Motto, which is highly dense, as Steve says, which it is, I think people are looking for that connectivity. They're looking for that personal relationship and literally to be able to reach out and communicate with their neighbor by voice even, or knocking on the wall. I think if you want solitude, go to a farmette. If you want to live in high density, go to Motto. If you want to live in a cottage, go to Selborne, if you can find one that's available. So if you want to live in an apartment and try it, because I had never lived in an apartment. It's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I have a fabulous view out my window of the land bridge to Swan Ridge. When I wake up, I see those chimneys from those townhomes. It looks just like I'm in Europe.
Yeah.
And I have all trees outside. I look outside, it's 100% trees. Very different from my townhouse. So I think that's a long way of saying, find your own way here, because there's so many things for you to look at and do and try that if you can't find something, you probably, maybe it's not for you, which is okay.
Yeah,
you know?
sure.
Everybody has a place.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not a great answer, but
that's a great answer.
That's the answer
Find your
to
way.
it. Yeah, find your way.
Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you spending this time with us.
Steve, we just love having you and Honey and you being part of making this happen and being literally part of it in so many ways. So
thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to see everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Serenbe Stories. New episodes are available on Mondays. Please follow us and leave us a 5-star review. And visit our website to learn more about guests, episodes, and everything Serenbe at serenbestories.com. This episode is supported by the Inn at Serenbe, nestled in the rolling countryside of the bucolic community of Serenbe, where guests can walk on the 15 miles of private trails through preserved forest land, the wildflower meadow, and the animal village. Relax at the pool, hot tub, or in rocking chairs on a wraparound porch. Play on the croquet lawn, grab a canoe, and jump on the in-ground trampoline. Connect with nature and each other, all while staying in a luxurious space at the Inn at Serenbe. Book your stay today at serenbeinn.com, SerenbeInn.com.